At the end of Beau is Afraid, Beau's mother, Mona, says this to him.
Ever since you clawed your way out of me, I've had to dig down deep to my very bottom and squeeze the love out of myself, but still I gave it to you. I've given you my whole life, which you took, and you took, and you took, and I squeezed myself empty.
When I saw this scene, I sunk into my seat. By the time the credits rolled, I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I managed to get to a restroom where I tried to compose myself, but I couldn't do it. I was having an anxiety attack. Finally, I called a friend who helped me calm down and really just listened to me cry. Anxiety attacks aren't super common for me. I think that was my second one in 2 years. I'm usually pretty good with difficult movies also, like, sure, I'm on enough HRT to depress a horse, but this was different. This was a trigger. We only have so much control over how we experience art. We do try to curate as much as we can, from creating spaces to exhibit the art to providing good and necessary content warnings that keep the art from ruining our day or year. But nobody can account for everything. Truth is, you can prep as much as you want, but you'll never know how much a piece of art will affect you until you're right there with it. Why did Beau is Afraid give me an anxiety attack? This video will examine that question, but I also want to talk about how we all, as individual people, consume art and how Beau is Afraid plays on that. Most importantly though, I want to talk about emotions. After all, those things are the reason I'm even making this video. This one's going to be tough, so no hard feelings if you skip it. Oh, also, full spoilers throughout.
It's been a long time. Has it? Several months. Well, you're feeling guilty about that.
What is Beau is Afraid about? I'm not sure it's something you can summarize, but people have tried. According to Wikipedia, its plot follows the mild-mannered but paranoia-ridden Beau as he embarks on a surreal odyssey to get home to attend his mother's funeral, realizing his greatest fears along the way. Here's one from Letterboxd. A paranoid man embarks on an epic odyssey to get home to his mother. IMDb says, following the sudden death of his mother, a mild-mannered but anxiety-ridden man confronts his darkest fears as he embarks on an epic, Kafka-esque odyssey back home. These are all pretty similar, and they're not exactly wrong, but for me they don't feel right. Like there's something off about them. For instance, the word odyssey. While it's true that Beau, our protagonist, starts at one place and ends at another, calling it an odyssey feels tonally dissonant to what Beau experiences. This odyssey starts when a man falls on top of Beau in a bathtub, causes him to run outside naked, get hit by a car, and stabbed by a serial killer. Good start so far. He then wakes up in the care of a very strange family that seem cosmically unable to get him to where he needs to go, i.e. his mother's funeral.
I don't know if today's gonna happen.
It's only when he's blamed for their daughter killing herself that he's chased out of their home and into the forest. Ulysses, he is not. For me, Odyssey conjures up images of Trojan warriors and great heroes sailing on voyages home. That's not what's happening here. This isn't a Joseph Campbell joint. If we use hero's journey elements to describe Beau's story, then we wind up building an expectation that, I argue, doesn't fit the film. If Beau is a hero, he's a very bad one. If his journey is supposed to challenge him, then it's poorly written. For instance, Beau has no agency. That's traditionally a bad sign for a hero, or at least it makes them pretty boring. But if this isn't a hero's journey, Beau isn't supposed to have agency, and his journey isn't meant to better him, then the film is working as intended. Even to say embark on an odyssey, as many of the above websites do, implies some kind of control of the situation. You are embarking. You are choosing to go somewhere. Beau doesn't choose to get stabbed and hit by a car. He doesn't choose to be blamed for a young girl's suicide. These are all things that happen to him. It feels less like a journey and more like Beau is being displaced. That might be a better word here. Beau is displaced from his home by outside circumstances and ends up at other places where he gets displaced again. Beau is not a hero. He's a refugee. That's not completely accurate either. We later learn that his mother owns a super conglomerate. How many refugees can say that?
Admired by her friends and feared by her competitors, Mona Wasserman was a local industry titan and a force to be reckoned with.
And where would he even be a refugee from? His apartment that's out to kill him? His mother? What place does Beau call home? Actually, I hear you screaming from your monitors. You totally can use Odyssey and embark in this way, and you're just making a really pedantic argument. You are absolutely right. This is a pedantic argument. Truth is, I wouldn't be happy with any plot summary of this movie, because I don't think we should summarize this film at all. I argue that knowing what's happening in Beau is Afraid only brings us so close to understanding it, and it certainly doesn't explain why I got an anxiety attack. Beau is Afraid is a very complicated movie. Its plot is purposefully obtuse and open to interpretation. Heck, in the middle of the movie, Beau goes on an extended dream sequence with orphaned forest actors. Like, why are we even trying to summarize it? It's clear, to me at least, that this movie doesn't want to be simplified like that. In order to get the answers we want, we're going to have to look beyond the plot. It's time for Film Analysis 101, Fabula and Sujet. Sometimes we run into a movie that's a bit more complicated than we're used to. Think Memento, Sixth Sense, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. In these cases, describing the plot of the film doesn't give us a complete picture of the work. Luckily, a bunch of Russians came up with words that have haunted film studies majors for decades. Fabula and Sujet. You know those explainer videos you see on YouTube? The ones that are like, 5 Nights at Freddy's Solved, or what really happened in this show? They're all talking about Fabula, or the work's chronological sequence of events. What happened? When did it happen? These are all Fabula questions. But 5 Nights at Freddy's isn't a history book. The actual game itself goes between a security guard in a restaurant and cryptic mini-games and a spooky history. How a narrative work is presented, what we call the story, this is known as the sujet. The lighting, camera angles, themes, metaphors, heck, how the events are ordered temporally, flashbacks, flash forwards, etc. This is all the sujet. Let's use Super Mario Bros. As an example. The game starts with Mario in front of a castle going to rescue the princess. These are the first things we see, so this would be the beginning of the game's sujet. Or you could argue it starts even earlier, at the title screen. But we also know that the princess was kidnapped, even though we don't actually see that happen in the game. That would be the start of the Fabula, as chronologically, that's the earliest thing we know happens in Super Mario Bros. I know this sounds complicated, but trust me, it'll all make sense in the end. Fellow film major graduates, please forgive me for being a bit inconsistent in my word choices here. I know that within film theory, words like story, plot, narrative, form, and structure have specific definitions and you really don't want to mix them up, but I don't have a semester's worth of time here, so just please let me have this. Please let me have this. So why do we do this? Well, being told what 5 Nights at Freddy's is about feels very different from playing the game. Explaining the plot of Memento doesn't convey the experience of watching it unfold backwards. Understanding a movie means not just knowing what happens, but also how its structure influences that understanding. It's very rarely an either-or situation, though the common assumption for most film critics is that the fabula takes precedence over the sujet. This comes from the classical idea of finding the truth of a work, and that everything else works in service of that. The truth here being the plot of the narrative. This is the way most of us have been trained to look at stories. What we see is what we get. So when something comes along that challenges that perception, how do we go about analyzing it? One way is to delve even deeper into the fabula. There are many creators whose entire bread and butter is doing exactly that. But at some point we have to realize that a hole is just a hole. We aren't going to strike oil. no matter how far we dig. When the plot fails to give us the information we need, it's time to turn to the sujet. Here's where things get more complicated. If analyzing the fabula means understanding the objective events of a narrative, analyzing the sujet means understanding the feelings that come from how those events are presented. There's actually a term for this kind of analysis, cognitive film theory. It basically says what we've already been talking about, that a movie can be examined through the emotional and psychological effects it has on its audience. This leads to very broad findings, as you can imagine. Everyone lives their own specific life and will come to a film with a different set of experiences, which can lead to a wide range of reactions. Even the way in which you watch a movie, from in a theater, a TV, smartphone, can change how it makes you feel. PhilosophyTube has a great video about this. Or you could just watch Ways of Seeing. Just watch Ways of Seeing. It's very good. With cognitive film theory, the only emotional reaction we can know and comment on is our own, and hope that through shared human experiences, some number of others will have similar reactions to us, or at least relate in some way to what we express here. If that doesn't sound very objective, it's because it's not. Art is subjective. Art analysis is subjective. Sorry, folks. The main feeling I had watching Beau is Afraid was that something was wrong. I couldn't always put my finger on what that was, but nothing ever feels right in the film. Even moments of supposed clarity, sequences that are arguably the most straightforward, feel off. The world of the film is a lot like ours, but also very much not like ours. It's an uncanny valley. Beau is Afraid is very close to being completely surreal, but it has just enough reality in it to make it more off-putting than something completely fantastical like a Terry Gilliam film. For instance, the street Beau lives on is filled with degenerates and murderers and even a dead body. But it's not realistic at all. It feels more like an 80s public service ad, the kind with Nancy Reagan at the beginning. The villains all have tattoos and look like bikers. It's pretty ridiculous. Is this supposed to be a commentary on outdated urban fiction, the kind usually found in over-the-top action movies? Things only get more confusing when you realize that the racist element usually found in such propaganda is completely absent here. The people in Beau's rundown neighborhood are largely white men. Big, hulking men, sure, but still white. So not only is this depiction of inner city violence completely unrealistic, it's not even absurd in the way we expect it to be. Is the lack of people of color its own statement on racism? What is the film trying to say here? Whose unfounded fears are being presented? What lens are we supposed to see all this through? What's absent from Beau is Afraid is just as important as what it shows. It's uncanny not only because of what we see, but also for what it's missing. There are gaps, big purposeful ones that our brains desperately want filled, but the film never gives them to us. The fabula continues to betray us. All we can rely on is our feelings. Take the beginning of the movie. Beau's Afraid opens with a loud and chaotic pregnancy, made barely visible through a point-of-view shot from a newborn baby, presumably Beau. We immediately go from this moment to an overbearingly quiet psychiatrist's office. Adult Beau is timid and visibly unwell in some yet unknown way. This whiplash in tone serves to disorientate us. It prepares the audience for the roller coaster ride that is the rest of the film. As well, it filled me with a large amount of dread once the appointment officially started. Now that I know this film is capable of the intensity of the opening sequence, I also know that it could do it again at any moment. In this way, the film instills in me the same feelings that Beau himself is having. The audience is just as uncertain as Beau is on what his future might hold. Once he leaves his psychiatrist's office, the film confirms what Beau and the audience have feared, that this world is a nightmare. A nightmare seemingly built for his suffering and, by extension, our suffering. Beau is Afraid purposefully satisfies no one. Those looking for a more grounded horror movie, like the filmmaker's other work, Hereditary, for instance, will be incredibly confused by this film's style and structure. Those looking for a surreal odyssey a la Mad God will be disappointed that the film doesn't go far enough. It exists within this middle realm of fantasy and reality, never fully conforming to either. It's a tightrope performance that makes everyone miserable. The best example of this is the dream sequence that happens in the middle of the movie. It's by far the most surreal moment in the entire film. It's also the most divisive. Consider our two made-up viewers, one who wants a regular horror film and one who wants some Dolly-esque fantasy. The dream sequence, which lasts for a good chunk of time, would be considered boring and unnecessary to the former, while the latter might say that here the film is finally getting good. Yet even these two opposite reactions are thematically consistent with the film. If the dream sequence in Beau is Afraid feels pointless to you, then you are rewarded because everyone in this village is about to be killed not 5 minutes later. You are correct, it was pointless. If you love the dream sequence and saw it as an allegory for the film itself, then you might recognize that the futility and contradictions in it are proven true by the upcoming violent attack. In both cases, the end result feels inevitable. We know this killer is coming, we know he is out to kill Beau, it's only a matter of time. Whether we like this moment in the film or not, we know what's about to happen, and we still have that same sense of unending dread we've felt since the beginning of the movie. There is no time where we ever feel at ease, even if we enjoy or hate what's on the screen. The whole film is a painful experience. It's very funny in a "it's so dark I don't know what else to do but laugh" sort of way, but it's not the kind of movie where you leave the theater feeling better. Beau's Afraid is not so much interested in creating a good time as it is in fully exploring the psychoses of a man and bringing you right there with him. It's not exactly a spoiler to say that Beau doesn't get a happy ending. That was never the plan. And I think that's interesting. Sometimes art isn't supposed to make us feel good. Sure, that's one emotion it can give us, but people have a whole spectrum of feelings. Art can make us feel sad, angry, bad, guilty, uncomfortable, and any other negative emotion and still be valid as art. So much of mainstream entertainment is based around making audiences feel as amazing as possible that it's a nice change of pace to see something that so blatantly flaunts its desire to do the opposite. This is not an anti-content warning video because I would never make one. Knowing what you're getting into should be a basic human right when it comes to experiencing art. I honestly wish I had known how this film was gonna make me feel before I saw it. I probably would have been able to handle it better. Maybe I wouldn't have watched it at all. But unfortunately, what's done is done, but others shouldn't have to go through that experience if they don't want to. Narrative isn't completely unnecessary in Beau is Afraid. It's just that the things we learn about Beau and the events that happen to him exists more to confirm our instincts than to tell us anything new. I've done a bit of the map pad over analysis and frame pausing and Easter egg hunting. I could put together a "here's what I think really happened" video explaining every moment of this movie, but knowing more only confirmed what I already knew, that Beau's life sucks, and I figured that out when I cried in the theater. If I were to make a thesis statement about this film, it'd be something like, Beau is Afraid is a reflection of the anxieties and paranoia that everyone faces under a hierarchical system of rule. Beau is a passive character because we are all passive characters in a world we have no actual say in. Beau is all of us. Beau is me. This goes with how I think the film is better understood emotionally. How we react to what happens to Beau relates to how we react to our own experiences under oppressive systems. The world of the film is a surreal hellscape because our world is a surreal hellscape. Beau is Afraid feels uncanny because our world is uncanny. Understanding Beau is Afraid is to understand the nagging emotions we've always had, that we are all victims of a system that is lying to us. The top of the hegemony in Beau is Afraid is undoubtedly Beau's mother, Mona, a looming force throughout the entire film. It's not until subsequent viewings that you realize just how far her influence goes. It's obvious how much control she has over Beau's life, but what's less noticeable is how much power she has over everything else.
Mona, who single-handedly built a super business beyond her wildest dreams.
Beau's anxieties about his mother and his anxieties about the world are one and the same. Under systems of oppression, society is molded by the benefactors and vice versa. I think the film frames Beau's anxieties as both personal and societal because that's how it is for everyone. Is a mother telling you what to do any different from a church telling you who to pray to? Or a pharmaceutical company dictating what pills you can buy? If anything, such conditioning begins at the youngest age possible, so it makes perfect sense for Beau is Afraid to start with a birth. Beau Beau cannot fall into the expectations of the system, even though he so desperately wants to. He wants his mother's approval, but also resents how much she controls him. He wants independence, but he's terrified of making the wrong choice. Everyone else in the film allows themselves to live within the hypocrisy and make it work for them. Beau is incapable of that. Thus, he suffers from debilitating anxiety. He cannot ignore the incongruencies of his life, and he also can't or doesn't want to rebel against them, so he lives with perpetual nervousness. The kicker is, everyone else who supposedly has it together is miserable too. To me, this is very relatable. I suffer from anxiety. I take pills for it. It's not a fun experience, especially when there are horrible things out there waiting to smother you and you can't do anything about it. Anxiety spreads to every corner of your life. I'm constantly playing this game of, is this worth being anxious about, or is it just a side effect of another thing that I absolutely am anxious about and should be anxious about? I'm very pro medication, obviously, but a pill can't stop a meteor from falling on your head. I think it's time to answer the question that got us here. Why did Beau is Afraid give me an anxiety attack? At the end of Beau is Afraid, Beau's mother, Mona, says this to him.
I've given you my whole fucking life, which you took, and you took, and you took, and I squeezed myself empty.
These are the same words that my own mother has said to me. I know this word is used a lot, but the truth is my mom gaslighted me my whole life. There were reasons for this, which I won't get into here. It could be its own video, honestly. I just will say that my upbringing wasn't exactly typical. For instance, Mom used to say,
My own mother wouldn't even touch me. I wasn't worthy of her love. I hadn't earned it. She blamed me for everything her mother did to her. When I had you, I promised I will never do that to him.
My mom had a terrible mother who made her miserable. Grandma would make Mom feel unwanted and ugly. You know, my mother grew up anorexic. She never really recovered from that. She told me she would never be like Grandma. So, of course, my mom body shamed me all the time. I was always too skinny or too fat or whatever, you know. I remember we used to go to Disneyland and she'd point at overweight people and go, how could they do that to their bodies? Like in the most angry voice. And they say trans women aren't socialized like women. Here's another one.
You know what I tell people when they ask me how my son is doing? I say your guess is as good as mine.
My mom told me she would lie to her friends about how I was doing when I couldn't get a job or I was doing something she was ashamed of. She couldn't bear to tell the truth about her daughter. There was this other time where she was really upset about something. Maybe she was crying because she thought I was too fat again. Maybe it was after I came out as trans. Anyway, when she was really upset with me, she would say,
I've been ground down to nothing by love and panic and worry. Is my baby hungry? Is he healthy? Is he scared enough of the world? And the fruit of all this anguish is grief.
Imagine what that does to a child, being told that my actions were killing her, that my happiness was tied to her happiness. It was terrifying. The biggest gut punch in Beau is Afraid, I think, is the reveal that Mona had been secretly recording Beau's therapy sessions.
Well, like she would give me lots of love.
Oh, I gave you lots of love. I'm sorry.
But if I didn't give it back to her in the exact same way, she saw it as me being not thankful and like trying to hurt her. So the love was conditional? Yes. Ah, this is very good for you, Beau.
It's too horrifying for words. How could any mother who claims to love their child even consider this? When I started going to therapy, I quickly discovered that a lot of my stresses and anxieties were directly tied to my parents and my upbringing. So naturally, I tried to talk to my mom about this, hoping to understand and maybe get closure, that'd be nice. She responded by saying, "Your therapist is missing context. Let me into these sessions so I can explain everything to him." I never took her up on that. Did I mention that I was 30 when all this was happening? In case it isn't obvious, I relate to Beau so much that it hurts. His timidness, his fear of making decisions, I had all of these things. I still do. I'm working on it. I'm a lot better now, but seeing it all laid out like that, it was visceral. I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once, a fantastic movie. When the mother and daughter reconnected and grew closer, I felt a needle in my heart. I knew this would never happen for me and my mother. Beau is Afraid was much more accurate, too accurate. So accurate that I couldn't breathe. Really, an anxiety attack was inevitable. Not everyone had the same experience as I did watching Beau is Afraid. I know plenty of people that said they couldn't relate to it. I can't speak to that. I can only know how I felt. I can't know anything else. My very unscientific study of reading a few reviews and talking to my friends who have seen the movie revealed something that I thought was pretty interesting. Even the people who hated Beau is Afraid admitted there was something deeply uncomfortable about it, but they couldn't always place what it was, because the film's plot, that fabula, was so confusing. This feeling, I believe, is the closest art can get to creating a universal emotion. We can't control how art will affect us, and art can't know the life of the person who consumes it, but there are moods, there are vibes. I know it sounds like I'm making a joke, but it's true. When you go into an office and everyone's staring at their computers, you can't know what they're thinking, but you can feel something. And I think 99% of those cubicles feel it too. There's something wrong here, even if you can't quite put your finger on it. I think that's the best description of Beau is Afraid sujet. There is so much I could have talked about with this film. I could have mentioned how Beau had this long-lost crush that might have been working for his mother the whole time. I could have talked about the ending where Beau is put on trial for every possible fault in his life. I could have talked about how everyone Beau meets seems to work for his mother. Heck, I could have talked about how Beau's father may or may not be a giant penis monster. But I guess that's the point I'm making. As interesting as those moments are, they tell us what we already know. Beau's life sucks. His mother controls everything. He's traumatized. Beau is Afraid doesn't hammer its message into you so much as it bores bad vibes into your cranium like a drill. You will feel bad and you won't know why. But isn't that what life is like for many of us? When you live under the constraints of hierarchies, this is your normal. The real question is, should it be? Beau dies at the end of the film. His mother screams for her boy despite being the one who killed him. What were Beau's crimes? What did he do wrong? He didn't play along. He couldn't play along. He wanted to, desperately, but he couldn't. And it destroyed him. Sometimes we already know what the problem is, but we can't quite name it. But we can feel it. Take it from a girl who's been there before. When your gut is talking, fucking listen to it.
1, 2, tie your shoe. I was born in the year of our Lord. The year of our Lord. My Christ, the year of our Lord. I was born in the year of our Lord. A 1 and a 9 and an 8 and a 9 and a 1989.
Thank you all so much for watching. Quick before you go, I just want to say I am just beyond excited and happy and everything about how well my channel's been doing. I can't believe how many of you like the content that I've been making. Shout out to my Patreon, obviously. You can see their names somewhere. Special super shout out to Gomer, who is just awesome, and I thank you so much for your donation. If you would like to donate, there will be a link in the comments below. might be a tree link, multi-link thing. I have a lot of stuff that you can go to. Big announcement, I am going to do a Q&A, a Q&A to celebrate every amazing thing that's been happening. So please, if you have any questions for me, comment them in the comments below this video, and I'm going to answer them all in a live stream very, very soon. You can ask whatever you want. Try to be nice. I will have the next big, large video essay hopefully next month. It's going to be a lot more fun and a lot more goofy, I hope, than the last couple of videos have been. Anyway, I just want to thank you all so much again, and I hope to see you next time with love in my heart. Oh, I liked Beau is Afraid. I don't know if I said that. I did like Beau is Afraid. Just be very careful before watching it. One last thing, Hell of a Boss is kind of good now. The last 2 episodes were pretty solid. You can ask questions about that. Sale just good job. I think I made that happen. Let's pretend I made that happen. Alright, I think that's good. I'm not gonna worry about it. Larg, 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 larg. Am I seeing it? Or is that gonna